So we're fortunate enough to have folks from diverse investing schools. Two partners from the most storied, two new partners from the most storied Silicon Valley VC firms. One angel turning into an institutional investor. And a guy who is trying to disrupt the venture capital industry from the bottom up. Naval, what are you doing on this panel?
I don't know. You invited me. I think I snuck in. That's kind of my whole motif: sneak in a venture capital, even when uninvited.
Security. So, who should you get your first money from? Well, I asked each of the panelists before the panel to send me one sentence describing their brand, and then I anonymized the sentences to see if you guys could match the brand statement to the panelists. So, slide. All right, let's see if the audience can identify you guys by what you think you are. Number one, we are the largest online network of startups, investors, and talent. Number two, 4 decades of investing in missionary entrepreneurs to help build disruptive companies of lasting significance. Number three, we're an independent fund that writes small supportive checks to technology-enabled companies focused on differentiating through design and product. And number four, Steve, Sandy, Jerry, Larry, Sergey, Max, Reed, Chad, Brian, Drew, Jack. Who? All right, so I'm going to need you guys to call out stuff and shout and be disruptive. Number one. All right, got that one. Number two.
See, all VC firms are the same. Nobody can differentiate.
It helps when you invest in the same company.
Number two. Mike, it's true. Number three. Tish, the only investor on this panel that's actually based in New York. Way to go, Tish. And number four, Sequoia. Yeah, number four was really good. So why do I bring this up? Because after Andreessen's meteoric rise in the past 4 years, investor branding has become a key differentiator, or at least people think it has, which is sort of the same thing. Go Margit, who runs Andreessen's PR communications and runs it so well, she's actually a partner. Margit Wanamaker is her name. She's pretty cool. But some, even especially Chris Dixon, who now works for Andreessen, argue that individual partners are more important than firms. So why and when should someone pitch each one of you individually? And start with Mike.
Sure. So I think each partner at any partnership has a different set of experiences. And actually, even looking across the panel here today, I mean, everyone here has founded a company. And so for me, I tend to focus with my background in engineering and having started a company, oftentimes on companies that are more engineering-centric or design-centric, just having built products myself. And it's important because, at least in my view, just to have empathy with founders and being able to understand what they're actually going through. So I tend to love to work with folks who want to get some help, and I put help in big quotes because I think there's differences between good help and bad help as an investor. And I guess having seen that firsthand, I'd like to think that I can actually help entrepreneurs basically go realize their dreams.
All right.
Well, I think that we look at our job as being to help founders turn imaginative ideas into enduring companies. And I think that when you're trying to do that, it's helpful to have had some experience trying to do that yourself. It's not only empathy, as Mike said, it's also many of the challenges faced by early stage companies are very similar in terms of recruiting people and making the big early strategic decisions and just setting the culture of the company. And I challenge the assertion of the premise of the question a little bit in that I don't think we don't think the individual partners as important as the collective knowledge of the partnership. And when we invest in a company in Sequoia, the whole partnership stands behind it, and many partners will work with a single company on a team basis. But And through that, each partner brings a different thing. So in my own case, I've been involved in starting 2 companies and have built them up, and they haven't been software companies. My other partners have been in, Alfred was involved in building Zappos, and Rulof at PayPal, and Brian at Google. And so what we do is we give a collective embrace to the entrepreneur at the early stage to help them get the company off and make a good start.
Has there ever been a Sequoia company you didn't stand behind? Were you behind color? Like, has there ever been a Sequoia company where other partners got behind it and you thought in your mind, ooh, I don't know about this one?
You know, in a partnership, people have different views, but once we invest, we all stand behind them, including color, including any company that we invest in.
Naval?
Yeah, I don't believe I have any proprietary judgment or value add. I'm just a dude, right, doing a startup like everybody else. And I've got some experiences, and you've got some experience, and maybe I can give you some data. But I think, at least from my end, it's far more interesting to have built a network and a product, so that when someone says, hey, can you help me find a Ruby on Rails developer, which I know you get hit up for all the time, I can say, yeah, here's AngelList talent. We got 2,000 of them looking. Here are the ways to prioritize and search and use the product, and call me later if you fail. And you know, if you want to find investors, then it's better to build a network. You want to find customers, build a product. So at least from my end, as a technology entrepreneur, I want to solve the problem with product. I don't think I have better judgment or networks or advice than these guys, but I've got a product. So that's what I focus on.
When an entrepreneur asks in person to be introduced, or asks you to invest in person, do you tell them to use AngelList?
I do, and you know, to some extent, I rarely invest personally these days, and when I do, it's usually for things that I have an affinity for. So, you know, if I'm into Bitcoin or drones or 3D printing or whatever my latest obsession is, it's something I'm going to spend time on anyway. So I may as well invest and learn a little bit. But the environment has gotten extremely efficient. There are lots and lots of investors, each specializing in their own portions. They're kind of the Goliaths like Kleiner and Sequoia standing above it all. There's the specialists who know the different stages, who know the different sectors. So it's very hard to compete on that basis. And you're right, brand is very important because the best deals are obvious to many people, and it's very difficult to get into those. So I have to provide something proprietary. I have to bring something to the table that's unique and differentiated. And so with AngelList, you know, we focus on product, and that's our brand.
Yeah, so I'll answer your question, and then I'll answer a different one. But I think, you know, I write a small check. I write it alongside other investors. We're, you know, an independent angel, and I think the goal is to just try to be helpful and to not be negative. So there's 3 types of money, right? There's good money, there's money, and bad money, and the first 2 are fine. And so if you can just be money or be value add, I think it's a positive to the entrepreneur. Ideally, we're value add, but at the worst case, it's just money. I think for me, one of the more interesting questions is, as an early stage company, I'm an angel investor, I get asked this all the time, is who should we go raise an A from? Or who should we go raise a B from?
What do you say?
It's impossible to answer. Because the only data point you can have is either someone's invested in a company that looks like yours before, which means they probably won't invest in yours, or they've tweeted or blogged about your specific idea before to say like, oh, that's the person who's interested. So for me, if I look at a big fund, to try to figure out which partner at the fund is going to be most interested in this deal, or if the fund as a whole would be interested in this, is relatively impossible. And so the answer becomes, just go meet with them all, see who's interested, and then we can iterate from there, which I think is a disservice to the VC because they're not actually, they're almost not able to advertise the things that they like or look for because it's limiting in a sense. So if they say, here are the 8 things we fund, if 9's actually the biggest company, they'd fund that too, so they don't list the 8. And I think as an angel investor at the early stage, it's really hard to say, you should talk to Kleiner for this or Sequoia for this. And I sort of am at a loss there too.
Who do you end up recommending the most?
Excuse me?
Which firm do you end up recommending the most?
Look, I think being in New York, you know, USV is the fund that I aspire that all my companies theoretically go raise money from. They've backed some of the iconic social and network companies of the past 10 years, and I think if you fund a company in New York, the goal is that, you know, Fred Wilson or the other partners at USV tend to fund it. And I think, you know, beyond that, out west, there's a ton of really good firms.
Name 3.
Name 3 of them?
3.
Andreessen, Horowitz, Sequoia, and Kleiner.
Oh, great job. That's. But notice who you said first. For the entrepreneurs in the audience, because you're probably mostly entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, What are areas you'd like to invest more in that you don't see a lot of deal flow in today? What should people be working on?
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm certainly keen on identifying areas where more foundational research is actually going on. I feel like 30 years ago, we had efforts like Xerox PARC and Bell Labs, and a lot of that research oftentimes led into, I think, really disruptive technologies. And so, to put that in more concrete terms, looking at interesting trends that are going on in the academic world that may or may not fundamentally change the world that we live in. And so if you think out, 100 years, and you say, well, there must be self-driving cars, or what other kind of big ideas, you say, what are the technologies that are needed to go enable that? Are things that we are fundamentally interested in backing?
Like Google Glass?
Well, I think that Glass is, I think, a great innovation on the step to larger, we'll say, kind of trend, in my opinion, around sensors on the body and data and machine learning, and looking at that intersection, what kind of new applications and services can be built along those lines. And I think we're just very early on that. So I'm certainly very excited about that.
Yeah, on Google Glass, I think that the thing I love about Google is that they take these moonshots and go for self-driving cars and glass, and I just think that's fantastic. I'm bearish on the consumer applications for Google Glass. It's hard for me to imagine lots of people walking around wearing it. I forget who said the eyes are a window to the soul, but I think there's something to that. And the idea of talking to someone who's always glancing off like this in a space, like some teenager with a bad attitude, I think is pretty off-putting to people. So I don't see it being a consumer thing, but I think there are lots of commercial applications for it in security, in pick and pack logistics, in healthcare with surgeons and paramedics and stuff. So I think that it's a huge step forward, and it'll find its market, but I don't think it'll be in the areas that people are kind of excited about today.
So, I mean, the future or Segway?
I think it's part of the future. I think wearable computing definitely is a trend. I'm more inclined to believe in the wrist than the face as being the place it'll start. I was surprised. I saw the CEO of a utility company the other day who tells me he paces around in the lift to measure his steps, to increase his steps on his using his up wristband.
Disclosure, Sequoia is a Jawbone investor.
We're a Jawbone investor, but I think it's part of a bigger trend. So yeah, I think wearable will be pretty big.
By the time those of us sitting on the panel can identify a trend, it's probably too late to think about entering it and exploiting it. It's the nature of successful companies that become iconic, that they're non-consensus right. People don't believe in them when they first start out, either because it seems frivolous, the market's too small. So it's easy to sit up here and shoot holes in people's ideas as being too small and say, go after the bigger trend. But the reality is that what you want to focus on is something where you have a deep conviction and belief. And most of the times you'll be wrong, so that's just the nature of the beast. But you don't want to go into something where you just came up with the idea sitting around brainstorming with friends a month ago, because that means the first time it hits a hiccup, you're gonna drop it. Or you're not gonna have a deep enough insight to pick the right approach on the market. So I think you should look at your company as an extension of your life to date. The dots should connect moving forward, and that way you're more likely to stick with it and you're more likely to proprietary insights. For me personally, I like deep technology businesses. I got into tech for the tech, not for the business part. But that's just a personal preference. Most of the great iconic companies built in the last half decade have actually had very thin technology layers at the app stack. And I get people like to sit up here and shoot holes in that stuff. They like to say, oh, that's not valuable, or we're doing frivolous things. But the reality is most of us built our fortunes or money or successes on social networking, which at the time was considered extremely frivolous. So I would say extend yourself into the company as opposed to sit around and try and figure out what the VCs want to fund or people want to see.
I tend to slant more towards consumer stuff, and so I stay mostly away from deep, hardcore enterprise technology. On the consumer side, I've always been under the belief that the internet should make my life easier. I'm pretty lazy. I like to do things from my home and press buttons because I'm antisocial. And the internet should enable that, and I don't think we've gotten to the point where you can basically do anything in life on the internet. And so whether that's technology that enables your house to be smarter, your car to be smarter, your life to be easier, you to access offline through technology easier. Anything that literally just makes life for normal people easier is a trend that I don't think I see enough.
What do you want in your life? What do you want the internet to make easier for you that it doesn't already do?
Well, there's a great old sci-fi story called The Machine Stops, and it's about the future where everybody lives in these underground pods and they press buttons and everything's brought to them. And I think that's what he's going
Like,
for.
have you seen the Jetsons? Like, I can't press a button and have food come out of the wall yet. Like,
And
that will.
Does your dog talk yet?
No,
Mine's not
right.
talking
Like, I'd
yet.
like those things to happen. But no, I think that if you think about it, you're spending about 80% of your time outside of work in your house or your car. And technology today in your house and your car is only enabled through you activating it, basically. And I think at some point, that technology will be passive and understand what you're doing in those two places specifically and start making it a lot easier. So why is my house the only way to engage technology in my house through my mobile phone? So if I want to do stuff on my TV, I have to pull out my phone to do that? That doesn't make sense.
You should be able to pull out your Google glasses. And
No, you just
link
understand.
I think maybe the point you're making is around just kind of anticipatory computing and saying, how can this actually work on my behalf versus always having to take some proactive action for it.
Totally.
Agree.
So the VC industry is notoriously shrinking, both in terms of dollars and a number of active firms. And there are a lot of disruptive forces. I know we use that word a lot, I'm sorry. I'm going to call the conference Erupt in September. Andreessen, AngelList, the increasing proliferation of non-VC, non-branded money like Pepsi. In this context, what do you guys think is the biggest threat? And why will your firms weather through it, i.e. be relevant in the next 10 years? Abbott again.
I'll start. The downside of having the last name start with the letter A. I think that it all starts with the entrepreneur. And I think it's about finding great entrepreneurs who have a passion around solving one of these problems, independent if it's in the consumer or the enterprise space, and helping that entrepreneur go realize his or her vision through company building and scaling to go build a business. And I think that is the most important thing for any firm to go do. Independent of brand or how new or how long a firm has been in business, at the end of the day, that is where it all starts. And that's also the metric that is used by our LPs. So to me, that's the most important thing, is how do we continue to find that talent and then provide the resources and the capital to go help those companies actually be built. And I agree with Eric's point earlier around the whole partnership coming together. I mean, a lot of what we do is, whether it be recruiting or partnerships, it's how do we give an advantage to that company? Because at some levels, if regardless if you raise money from Sequoia or KP, the dollar amount's the same, and it's going to still look the same in your account. And so it's how do we actually give companies a unique advantage in this competitive landscape at a global scale?
So, I mean, venture capital firms are part of the
answer.
No.
It's all
I just think
about the value we add.
No, I think that venture capital firms are part of the broader entrepreneurial ecosystem. That ecosystem evolves over time. And with the recent changes, things like Naval, AngelList, and the growth in seed investing, people have said, well, venture capital firms will go away and all the rest of it. And it hasn't happened. I mean, you've still got a bunch of venture capital firms who are doing just fine. And I think that the key thing, as Mike was saying, from the entrepreneur's perspective, the great thing about today's market is entrepreneurs have a choice. They have lots of different options. When I started my first company, I went up and down Sand Hill Road. It was hard for me to get meetings. When I got meetings, my co-founders, Mike Schroeffer, Basil Hashman, and I, we'd get shredded by people's questions. And it was a horrible experience. And today, by contrast, entrepreneurs don't have to go through that at all. They have lots of different ways that they can choose to raise money, one of which is venture capital. And I think the onus is on venture capitalists to demonstrate why the entrepreneurs should choose them. And in different firms of different strengths, in our case, we've had the privilege of working with many successful entrepreneurs through the years, and we bring that collective knowledge and help the entrepreneur think through their business and scale. And every firm will have to develop its own way of helping the entrepreneur. But the great thing for entrepreneurs, I think, is they have choice and they have lots of places they can go.
And so you think the choice is the most disruptive force, that
Yes, I think that the fact that the entrepreneur now can choose where to take investment from is the big force affecting the venture capital industry, and I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, where and who. I mean, I share that view. I mean, 10 years ago, when I did a Series A for a company, I started composite software in 2002. There weren't, I mean, I went up and down Sand Hill Road for several months.
Yeah.
And I was thrilled to get more than one term sheet so we could get the company going. Whereas today, there are so many options to go do. I think one of the implications, though, of that I saw certainly at Twitter, and I think I'm seeing this in our portfolio companies, is that the ability to access this capital is great, but it results in this diffusion of talent across a large number of companies that not every single one will turn into a business.
Yeah, I think that, so there's more, there's less stopping an entrepreneur from starting a company, and so the entrepreneurs need to be more disciplined. And don't start a company just because you can. Only start it if you really have conviction around what you're doing and you really think it can go somewhere. Otherwise, you could be much better off joining a fantastic growth company like a Square or a Dropbox or an Airbnb and being part of that success.
So I think this plays into a much bigger trend, which is the emergence of a totally new class of technology businesses, which I call lifestyle technology businesses. So because of the development of Amazon Web Services and all these different ways to make it easy to start a tech company without real hardcore tech involved, you see businesses that only have the upside of, call it, $10 to $50 million, which are real businesses which could pay for somebody to be wealthy, to have a really nice house, to hire a group of people to work for them, but they're not venture-backed businesses.
Lifestyle.
And they shouldn't be venture-backed businesses. The challenge is that there's not an investor class that has emerged to fund those businesses. And so what happens today is companies that really only aspire to be a $10 to $20 million company are forcing themselves into these bigger visions, these bigger pitches, to try to just get money because that's how they have to behave in order to get money. And so my belief, I don't believe that crowdfunding is going to fund the next Facebook. If it does, it's going to be a total aberration and we're all in trouble because then everybody's going to pour into that and lose a lot of money. I think that where crowdfunding can really, really be powerful is in these lifestyle businesses, where the upside is a more limited thing. There is a chance that once in a while these companies grow to be bigger, but at the end of the day, if you're investing at, call it a $1, $2, or $3 million valuation, you're going to take the $10, $20, $30 million exit and be pretty happy as long as you go into that investment eyes wide open instead of expecting 100x and be like, oh shit, this turned into a $10 million thing. So it's a fail, when in reality, that's all that the entrepreneur wanted at the beginning. They just don't have an ability to be comfortable saying that to VCs because that's not what the VC is looking for.
Yeah, riffing on that, the number of companies is exploding, and partially that's because the amount of venture capital is actually going up as you have non-traditional investors. The amount of capital they need is lower, and to Dave's point, the biggest driver of leverage and resources to a company today are things like Amazon Web Services and Google Android and iOS. Those are technology platforms that are just providing all this leverage to these startups. And not all of them should be venture-backed startups. Not all of them should go out and raise money. And they do have to figure out new and different exit models. But that trend is not going to change. The number of companies is going to continue to increase. And we're going to see lots and lots more of them. But they're not necessarily all going to be venture-backed or big exits.
So you think AngelList is the most disruptive thing to happen to VC?
No, I actually.
Jobs Act?
No, I think the most disruptive thing that happened in VC was things like AWS and iOS, because they reduced the cost of building a company so low that the number of investors could increase, that you could launch before you raise, that you can start quick, fail quick, and Y Combinator and AngelList and Techstars and all these things, and even angel investors today would not be possible without that huge reduction in the amount of capital required. And that comes because these capital platforms that are just have embedded leverage that they give to startup entrepreneurs for almost free.
All right, so we've got one more question. It's sort of important. So I'm going to take 2 minutes over if I need to, because I make the rules. It's an important question. In that Sequoia brand statement up there, there was only one female name. And I know it didn't seem like a female name because it was Sandy, but it was Sandra Lerner from Cisco, right?
Yep. Sandy Lerner.
And while that's the general state of affairs in tech, it shouldn't be. So what can we do to bring more women into tech, and what can we do to bring more women specifically into venture? And I know you guys are doing an okay job, but I don't know if you guys have a guy on, or a
my
girl.
last investment, I mean, the founder, CEO, Sharmila Mulligan, female, fantastic executive operator. I mean, and we have a number of partners, and we have 3 GPs that are females. And so, to me, it's happening. I think we have to go make an effort to go find great entrepreneurs, irrespective of male, female, where they are globally. And that's the approach we're taking.
I wish there were more women in venture capital, but I don't think that's really the biggest issue. I think that the big problem is that only 12% of computer science graduates in this country are women, and it should be 50%. And that gap, that 38% represents a huge lost opportunity, a huge loss of talent to the technology industry. And I think that's the thing that we should all work on. It's a big problem. We support a couple of great organizations that I'd encourage people to look at. Girls Who Code, which is a New York-based nonprofit, and She++, which was started by a couple of Stanford juniors, both encouraging girls to continue to consider computer science and technology as career paths. But it's a big problem, and I'd really challenge the audience here that that everyone has to help with this. And if you have a niece or a sister or a friend or anyone, encourage them to go to Code Academy and take a class, or to start a Girls Who Code club in their high school, or to something along those lines, because I think that it needs a broader effort.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Arif. My largest investment is in a female founder, sole founder, non-technical. It's Wanilo. Yeah, and the unusual thing there is that it's a female founder. I have about 5 more of those in my portfolio. The unusual thing is that she's non-technical. And that is something that normally I would not do. That was a very rare case. But she's very curious. She learns a lot very quickly, and she's gotten to a point without needing it. But the real tragedy is, for anyone in the audience, male, female, white, black, brown, green, whatever you are, learn to code. Even if you're not good at it, learn the language. We're in the business of technology.
You'll be employed forever.
I've made an effort over the past couple of years to try to fund more women, honestly. And 27 out of the 95 companies in our portfolio have a female founder. My last class at Techstars, 6 out of the 13 CEOs were female. So those are good numbers, whatever that means. I think that it's sort of a step back, though, is that the thing that bothers me the most about this question is when a female entrepreneur pitches a VC, and the VC's reaction is, oh, let me go ask my wife. That's bullshit. Like, you're a venture capitalist. You have an ability to evaluate these businesses yourself, and it doesn't require your wife to validate a female's business. And so the amount of times that I've heard an established VC go, let me go ask my wife as a market test, I just think that's bullshit. And I think if we can remove that and sort of remove the whole conversation and just look at these companies as though they're companies, I think that'll make a much better process.
Thank you. That's true. Hopefully in 5 years when we do this panel, it'll be either all women or a mix or the smartest people around, but hopefully that works. All right, let's do this. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.